Hello, this is Josh Katzman. I want to apologize first and foremost for being behind the ball and having to do this in a sort of unique way. I appreciate your understanding with that. I wanted to provide a chance to sort of give you a presentation still. So I'm going to walk you through basically the artifacts that I have to demonstrate what I've been working on this summer. These are not a complete list of everything I've done. A lot of it is sort of saved in journals and a collective resource for work, especially the Intrepid work with my colleagues for that. However, this is a good representation of the sort of work that I've been working on and I've been doing this summer. So without further ado, let me walk you through this. I hope this takes about 5 minutes or so, sort of like the presentation would in person. So I'm going to X this out and get started. So first thing is the summary paper. I broke down the hours. No time was spent on classroom organization. A fair amount of time was spent reading professional texts that are going to inform the work that I'll be doing throughout the year in this outdoor semester that I've created for Boston Public students called Intrepid Academy, as well as in my classroom this fall, September through January. Once January comes about, we'll be moving the students, my 11th grade students, from a traditional classroom to this outdoor experiential classroom based at Hale Reservation in Westwood. So a lot of the texts that I read are going to be reflected through the curriculum, primarily focused on natural-born heroes and guns, germs, and steel, and those are two texts. One's a creative novel, one is more academic in focus. So we wanted to make sure we engage students both in a more rigorous, difficult, traditional sort of textbook-like text, as well as text that will engage them on a much more personal level. Met a little bit at the beginning of the summer with my content team at my new school, another course to college in Hyde Park, part of the Boston Public Schools. My first go at being a history teacher. I've been an ELA teacher for the past 11 years. This will be my first year as a history teacher. So I went into this school year very, very concerned about that. How do I actually teach it? Originally, I had planned on my Intrepid Academy planning taking close to 80 hours of my time. And as I started going this summer, I realized that much more of my time was actually spent planning my history unit, because this was something very new, September through January. However, what I did, and it's reflected in this reflection as well as in my summary, is I realized that the work I was doing for the history unit is going to help inform my students' experience at Intrepid Academy once January comes around. So I realized that the Intrepid Academy planning was hugely important, the history unit planning was actually directly connected to the Intrepid Academy planning and its importance. The debate class, which I have, was basically just got the syllabus and the first week set for that. And it was quite good that I didn't spend a huge amount of time on that, because the day before school, the scope of the class sort of changed a little bit. It became a more traditional history class, although they said I can use most of what I have. And then here I left the guiding questions. My response is written below, and you can read that on your own. To walk you through here what I wanted to do, here's my plan. Again, I said Intrepid Academy was going to be approximately 80 hours. These two categories together, the Intrepid Academy and World History, I saw those as actually becoming very linked, and those became much closer to about 120 hours combined. And the reading that I did was actually directly in relation to planning for both of these. So in essence, I still reached pretty close to the 120 hours that I'd predicted for these two categories, perhaps a little bit more. What I wanted to show you here is just walk you through the log. again, spent the first half of the summer really kind of just trying to read and get a sense of the things that I was going to be doing over the summer and over the coming year. It was daunting. I'm launching Intrepid, a brand new program for the district, an innovative. No other program like this exists for, especially in large urban districts. So I want to make sure that's right. And then I also wanted to make sure that I do a good job as a history teacher September through January. So you can see here, that for Intrepid planning, we're using a unit or a curriculum called Big History. So I went through that. A lot of this, here, if we look here, a lot of my early days were spent working on the Big History unit, and that takes a lot of time. Just how do you teach it? What is this unit? So it's basically I went through the whole curriculum myself as a student, did some debate work, Intrepid planning, decided we have so many resources. My partner and I have been working on this for five years basically, that had to get just a solid lit review. So I put together a lit review here. Again, very long day for Intrepid. This was actually over a couple of days. This was sort of between vacations, and so put in probably one day about 7 hours, but mostly working on the lit review, and then started really focusing in on the 3-read model of Big History and how can I apply that to my work September through January. Then you can see we were away a little bit, and then I really started focusing. Once August came around, I realized I was like, oh no, I've got to get ready for September. So I really started focusing on history here. Met with the headmaster here on 8/12, and this became a hugely sort of driving force for the rest of my summer. I had gotten in touch with her and said, hey, what can I do? I'm a bit at a loss right now. So with her, I then communicated with the teachers in the grades before me, and then you can see right shortly after that, I had this big day where I blasted out the Intrepid curriculum map, really sort of just solidified everything that I'd been working on. And then the day before, right after the meetings here, had really started working on the syllabus for my history class. And then pretty much after this 8/12 day, everything was just kind of focused on history unit. Now this one, 8/14 to 8/27, again, we were away on vacation, and so over these like 10 days or so, 13 days, almost 2 weeks, I got about 12 hours while we were away. So it's a general thing, but I made some really good progress into that, and started to see connections between my work planning for Intrepid and the history class that I'll be teaching. Then you can see pretty much the rest of the summer was devoted to history planning, just these days just finishing up debate stuff. So let's get into some of the specifics now with the outline covered. Here's the curriculum map for Intrepid, which I have to say I'm quite proud of. Key texts and resources that we'll be using. We're going to excerpt most of these texts, as you can see here. Badges is an initiative we're working on with the Boston After School and Beyond to basically provide digital badges for students. The badges are around leadership, public speaking, and perseverance. So we're finding ways, how is the work we're doing informing that as well? How are students going to earn these digital badges? Which is something I spent a bunch of time on this summer, going to meetings for that, but did not include in this work. But as you can see, this is week 1. This has all of our 18-week semester that we'll have. Includes our guiding questions. So each sort of 1 to 3 weeks is covered with our guiding questions. right here. As you can see, we have them split down into several categories. Our formal assessments that we've decided. Again, we don't have specific lesson plans yet, but we know, like, as we get to know students, we're gonna create these formal lesson plans. And then this was the element that was incredibly time consuming. Was basically going through and explaining how everything that we're doing in each unit connects to ELA and history standards, math standards, obviously with our focus on modeling and statistics, and earth science standards as well. Students will be earning 4 full credits for all of these, as well as physical education, some of them for Spanish, and also for an additional science credit as well. Hopefully, we've been talking to colleges around the area, and we're hoping that students will actually be able to earn college credit. So this is the curriculum map, weeks 3 through 5, community building. Again, key texts or resources, badges. Again, split down by all of the standards for each content, the assessments right here that we have. And the guiding questions. So as you can see, we go down, we keep going down. We just continue this trend, new guiding questions, again, to try to make sure that every 2 to 3 weeks, students have a fresh take on something. So they're going to have these assessments due right here every 2 to 3 weeks. This is really their work right over here. They're going to have these projects due tri-weekly, essentially. And then here, weeks 9 through 11, maybe 14, are sort of the final teacher-driven ones. Again, lots of focus on which standards we're going to be covering. And then finally, we start turning things over 12 through 14 a little bit more to students, where we're looking at case studies of different innovations. So people who've used this idea of biomimicry is people who are using nature to really focus in on a challenge in society and use what they learn in nature to improve a challenge that they see in society. And then finally, it culminates these last weeks with students presenting their own ideas and Intrepid Talk, where they identify a challenge in their own community. Right here, how can I impact my school, community, or planet? And then they create a TED Talk with a solution, a TED-like talk that we're calling Intrepid Talks, and they present it to a band of local community leaders. And then that's in week 18 right here, and our final overnight, sort of a culminating trip to the mountains that symbolically represents the journey that they've achieved through Intrepid. Again, here's the lit review. I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, so just the extensive list of everything we've done, as sort of the key texts that have informed a lot of our work. And this is sort of the research behind our work, as opposed to the text that we'll necessarily be using in the class. Although a lot of these we will be using, like Flourish right here. We'll use in the text, or sorry, not in the text, in the class. Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. We'll be reading that. And then here, curriculum resources. Just these are some additional things that we've been thinking that these are things we can bring into our class as well, our world of Intrepid, to help engage kids in different ways beyond traditional classrooms. And here was just a list of possible learning activities. Again, just thoughts that we've had that we want to make sure we can come back to once we start getting into the specifics of our lesson planning related to this curriculum map. So now I'm going to start turning it more into the specifics for the history and debate class. This was one thing that is related to both. It's a positive learning community. That's one of the skills students have to show, is they have to show my history and debate classes. This is September through January. they have to help contribute positively to the learning environment. But instead of me sort of grading them and giving daily points, I'm working with 11th and 12th graders, so I wanted them to be able to self-assess. So what they do is this is for both classes, they have to say, what day did they contribute positively to class? How did they do it specifically? Don't just give me a generic answer. We're really focusing in terms of our writing. We're writing with clarity and purpose. So what did you do exactly? And then here, just explain, analyze. Why was it meaningful? And how do you expect to repeat it in the future? Students do this 5 times, demonstrate a benchmark, they earn that grade for positive learning community, and they have to complete 4 of these sheets over a term. Here's my Google Drive with a lot of the work that I've done for the history class. This was, as you can see, term 1, intro, days 1 through 7. So this is the stuff that I really focus on. My goal was to get through days 1 through 7 this summer to feel confident, and I did. So here's just an example of the syllabus. This is the syllabus. Started with a letter where I had students write to me, just gave them space. This was on day 1. And so I gave them space because I was predicting most students would not have a notebook. And then we went through the class structure and details. So you can see these driving questions that I talk about in my plan. This is what drives our work. So we're going to really be focusing in on these 5. We call this one 0 because it was our intro that we did sort of before we studied any specific content. And so 1 through 4, we're splitting the quarter up into these 4 questions. Again, this idea is similar to what we're doing in Intrepid. I want to make that transition easier for kids. So this helps them sort of get into that routine of, oh yeah, every few weeks I have something to produce around a question. These questions. Excuse me. And then some possible finals. I wanted them to know what might they be held accountable for. This just goes into detailing what I expect from them for the 3 reads. Again, on the syllabus, this is going to be hugely important, going over how we're going to do the 3 reading. And then this just goes over what we're going to learn, the driving questions and the sub-questions that we're going to explore. This is the grading and talking about how they have to demonstrate skills successfully. And actually the next little bit we'll go over is exactly the grading. But here's an example. They have to write a clear thesis. They might do it the first time and only earn a 70, a C. They don't do it too well. But then the idea is that they're going to go up and they have to demonstrate it 4 to 5 times for each skill over the quarter. And that's how they do it. So it might be, the point was, this was to show students, look, you can earn multiple benchmarks for different assignments. I apologize for the phone ringing in the background as well. Here, driving question, notebook, all these, again, this is something we went over in class. And then here is where I outlined all the skills and benchmarks that they have to demonstrate over first quarter and second quarter, because that's after this we'll be moving to Intrepid, to the outdoor classroom. Here's what, oh sorry, my session has expired. Here, I'll log in very quickly, and this was the first time in my teaching career that I've had my grade books set up. I've had my grade books set up before the start of school. So here you can see, this is all the assignments that students have to do. It doesn't matter, like they have to independently read these. So 4 times they have to demonstrate each of these skills. And so a lot of my time was spent, not a lot, but a fair amount of time was spent this summer just setting this up, determining the skills that they needed each quarter and putting them into this grade book. So then students, I can, if I click on here, who's finished their homework? Let's see if this works. So I go to scores and I can see here who's starting. Everyone starts at a 0 and they build their way up. And we can see as students start doing their work, they start earning these additional scores here. So a lot of kids have already done homework, but here I can quickly see, oh, who's not doing homework, who's not turning stuff in. That gives me a sense to be able to check with them. Just a sample here. This is how we started our day. These sort of big, or our year, these big philosophical classrooms. We're looking at a photo called the pale blue dot. There was a Word doc that went with this, and then we watched this video of a very philosophical idea behind Carl Sagan, that, you know, if you look at the world from billions of miles away, right here, this little dot right there is where everything that's ever happened in the world has been contained. And I wanted students to use that to frame all the work that we're doing throughout the year. Again, just another example of a slideshow for, and then moving into the text, A People's History of the World, and we're going to be using excerpts of that. For the sake of time, I'm going to speed this up a little. Here's the debate class. Again, this was the first 7 days. Very, very discussion heavy for this, so there was less sort of content here, but that's a 12th grade class. Syllabus, again, wrote a letter to the students and outlined the driving questions that we're going to focus on, but then they've presented a number of topics that we're going to do. We're using the 3 close read strategy there as well. I go over the grading with them, as well as the skills that they need to practice, and it's the same general idea. Here's an example. Again, should we have grades and homework in school? This was our opening, sort of comfortable for everyone, not too controversial, but everyone sort of has an opinion on it. This was our opening question for this class, and we're focusing on specific details again. So I actually modeled a way here, but then also in another example of how to improve using specific details to support our writing. Again, want this to be a skills-based class, not just something where kids are debating. Watched a video and then read a fairly sophisticated article on practicing that 3 read strategy, which we did also for the video, and got students right into work pretty much the first or second day, which has been great. So that's the presentation. Thanks for bearing with me, and again, thank you for your patience with my not getting this to you before. Take care.